Good morning and welcome to Plymouth Congregational Church, Minneapolis, Minnesota Sunday Forum for May 8th, Mother's Day. Thank you for being here. And if you're here with us live, wonderful, but if you're also here with us online, we want to extend you a special welcome as well. And because we record it then, you might also be viewing this not on Sunday morning of Mother's Day, but you're still very welcome to be here, and thank you for joining our program. My name's John Humphrey on behalf of the Sunday Forum Committee. Thank you for participating with us, and we have a wonderful program for you this morning. It's called Mine, which is an odd name, and I think we'll hear a little more about why that name is, but it doesn't tell you what it's about. But it's a very interesting video animation that Janae Bates has been part of the team of pulling together. So she'll be showing a clip of that for us this morning, and then talking more about the history and the future of that program. And so we're looking forward to hearing about that. Minister Janae Bates is the Communications Director for Faith in Minnesota, of which I am a member, and attended my DFL caucus yesterday and supported Ilhan Omar for our next senator. And she also is Communications Director for Isaiah, which is a multiracial, multi-faith statewide agency for vehicle for people in communities of faith, including Black-owned barbershops and child care centers. And essentially, the idea is to build a multiracial democracy by moving collectively and powerfully for racial and economic equity in the state. So if you are not familiar with Isaiah, you might, there's an isaiah.org website that you can go to learn more about the work that they're doing. Janae has been instrumental, in the implementation of the race-class narrative framework, and we'll be hearing more about that as her presentation this morning in both Minnesota and across the U.S. She is a womanist theologian and a Fulbright scholar, and has over a decade of academic and professional experience in ministry, social justice, and communications. So we are honored and very pleased to have you here with us this morning, Janae.
What a lovely introduction. Hello, everyone. Okay, so for those of you who have been a part of any kind of training or anything that I've done, you know that I strongly dislike webinars. And it is mainly because I like interaction, engagement. I want to, it's great to even be in person, just to be able to see you all and get to see your faces and reactions and all that, even behind a mask. And so feel free if you have questions or things like that. I am totally okay with like a popping up a hand. Hey, let me know. I want to hear feedback. Yes. Oh, I don't know. Is there amplified sound? I mean, I can.
Maybe just get the mic a little.
Oh, is this? Oh, I am so sorry. Yep, it was me. Totally makes sense. Human error is a real thing. All right. So, as mentioned, I'm Minister Janae Bates. I use she, her pronouns, and very, very grateful to be before you today. I am talking about a project that I've been a part of for 3 years now. And really proud of, really excited to be a part of. And also because I am the communications director with Isaiah. Isaiah has been a partner in helping to make sure this project came to fruition. So as a communications director, I am constantly thinking about the words we use, how we use them, and how we can help to allow people to be the best version of themselves. And I also get to do that work as a Christian minister. And so with mine, it was a way in order to have like an actual aesthetic, illustrative, concrete thing where we can start to really imagine the world that we talk about and don't always see. It gave an opportunity to have like a real vision, a beautiful vision of what the tomorrow that we're working for and fighting for could look like. But it has some like practical pieces in it, and realistic pieces that even in the world that we're fighting for and building and creating together, we're still going to have to wrestle about different things. It's not like a snap of the finger and then everything is perfect and beautiful and wonderful. We have to work for it, and we have to work to keep it, right? So I'm going to stop talking for a second, and I'm going to let you all watch the trailer for mine, and then I'll have a few more things to say, and then we can just like chat. Yeah.
It all started with the water. The world as we knew it was gone, consumed by flood, followed by drought. But then the water spoke to us and gave us a second chance. The water allowed us to build a new community from the ground up. We called it Bovota, beautiful water.
Some say our water is sentient. Some say our water is magical.
Before you two go, can you check my hydro generator? It seems broken.
I'll take a look.
I hope that our newest recruit is up to the monumental task of protecting this precious resource for future generations.
It's not the machinery, it's the water.
Nonsense. The water is infallible.
I can fix this.
You are not fixing anything alone.
Why would you even give me this job if you don't trust me?
So that was the trailer to mine. And that's a commercial. All right. There's a lot of really unique things about this particular miniseries. One thing is just how it came together. Usually when you get to see things like this, it is usually producers, directors, most certainly the artists who create the drawings and the writers, but they're all very much in artist mode. Like they're trained up to be artists, they're trained up to be, writers, directors, etc. And this project actually came together by a series of artists and a bunch of people who are like me, who work in organizing, who are focused on on the ground practitioners, organizers, communicators, people who are doing grassroots organizing work. And we came together initially 3 years ago in New Orleans. We were all in a group. We were talking about the world that we want to build together. And a bunch of us, through something called Rise Home Stories, decided that we wanted to create a series of projects. One of the projects is a video game. There is a video game called Volition that they ended up creating that was all about housing stability and affordability. And you have like a main character who gets to a woman who is living with their grandmother, so like the multi-generational family, and you're helping them to make decisions about where they are, where their home is being their neighborhood is being gentrified, and the things that they have to wrestle with around that. We also created a children's book called Alejandra, and about a young Latinx woman, young girl, who is also trying to figure out a lot around where she is within her home and her stability. And then we created Mine. And honestly, Mine started out at first as what we were going to call very explicitly the Capitalism Virus. And it was going to be more of a horror story. It was going to be in live action. It was going to be basically like there was this utopian kind of space, and then it devolved into what we currently have, because people became greedy and wanted to take for themselves. But then we decided that we wanted to make it more about the abundance that we really want to lean into, and we wanted to focus really heavily on the world that we're building. And so Mine was an opportunity to get to do that, to dream and to imagine. And so it is very intentionally multiracial, but also Black-centric. And so the main character is a young person named Blaze. Blaze is non-binary, which is also unusual for something that you would see in an animated film. Blaze has a sister named Mia. Mia is about 8 years old and is considered an elder of the community. So we wanted to be intentional about how intergenerational dynamics happen. And so the Elders Council most certainly has folks who are considered much older, those like Mia who are considered much younger. But it's really about decentralizing the leadership, but also in finding ways to build trust with one another across race, across gender, across ideologies, across age. And we really wanted to like make that an intention. So you have this sister, the sibling pair, where they are water bearers, and in the town, in the city of Bovota, this town is really unique in that they have a main source, and their main energy source and life source is water. And their water is life, and we recognize that even here in this current parallel universe, right? But in Bovota, there is something very unique about the water, and they've figured out ways in order for it to, of course, sustain us as human beings in our life, but also it's their primary energy source. It's how they have energy in their homes, in their transportation. It is also, there are healing properties to it. And so there are a series of things that happen in Bovota, in this place where abundance and their mantra in the city is everyone contributes, everyone benefits. And it is what actually has allowed them to create this beautiful, multiracial, multi-faith, multi-generational space of abundance. And it is just like democracy, something that we have to be intentional about keeping, because that can be very fragile if you're not, right? And so as the story progresses, you see ways in which they have to really wrestle together to ensure that the very precious water resource and their relationships with one another remain intact and can continue that abundance. So that's the kind of, without giving you too much about the story, that's kind of how the storyline progresses. Now, currently this series is, again, it's been created by some producers and myself. I'm considered a writer on the story. I was actually one of the people who came up with the idea that like water should be the main theme. and helped to create quite a few of our characters. Mia, the sister that I mentioned, she is actually an archetype of one of our Isaiah leaders. There's a woman who organizes out in Wilmer, Minnesota, and her name is Hamdi, and she is Somali. When she started organizing with us, she was just a teenager, but was just incredibly grounded in mission, in her faith, in the importance of connecting to one another, of being intentional about having a multiracial community. She is bold and courageous in every sense of the word. And when I first got introduced to her in Wilmer, there was a series of white supremacists who had come to the city and wanted to implement in the city what they called the Wilmer First Resolution, which was basically saying that they wanted to reject all resettlement of refugees. And Hamdi, who is a refugee and has settled her and her family in Wilmer and has made Wilmer home, Hamdi, something really rose up in her where she said, I want to push back on this. And so she showed up to every city council meeting. And there were some city council meetings where there were just like rows of white men who came armed. They brought their weapons with them, having them sit in their laps. And Hamdi, I'll get you in 1 second. And Hamdi, in her hijab, would sit in the front row and quietly wait her turn and come and speak so boldly and so prophetically about the Wilmer that she knew was possible, the Wilmer that she believed in. And so she also presented her own resolution to have Wilmer be an open and welcoming community to refugees, and that is the resolution that passed. And so absolutely, it was a beautiful, beautiful thing, and to get to watch that and be inspired by her and her work. Most certainly Isaiah had been working with her and with other leaders within Wilmer to help to ensure that that happened. And so when we were creating the character of Mia in mine, she was one of the first people that I thought of when we were thinking of like young people who, just cast this thought aside that I'm too young to stand in my power, I'm too young to do anything. But instead, I have something very important to add to this conversation. I have a very important voice in this moment, and I'm going to lean into it. And so that's who I was thinking of when we started to build up the character of Mia. And so similarly, many of the characters have come together by different organizers, different artists who are a part of this team of people. There's about 12 of us. And we are very much multiracial. We are also multi-faith, and some with choosing no faith at all. But we are also multi-ethnic, definitely a diversity in gender and background. And we wanted to build a world where we knew all of us would be able to thrive and survive, and both, of course, now, but for many generations to come. And so that's where the city of Bogota came from. And I'll go a little bit into like race class narrative because I know it was also brought up in this, and it's actually a useful piece that we were thinking of with the story of mine. And then I'll take some questions. We can kind of riff a little bit. So race class narrative is actually, just by a show of hands, have anyone heard of race class narrative before I go into it? Race class narrative. Okay. All right, I got one. That's good. Good. Okay, another test for the room. Has anyone heard of greater than fear? Greater than fear. Greater than fear. Okay, all right. This is, okay, all right, good. This is like a nice little focus group. All right, so race class narrative, which it's now starting to become rebranded as race class gender narrative, It started off as a research project, actually, in 2017. As Isaiah and Faith in Minnesota, we're these statewide organizations that are organizing people. That means we're also like on doors and doing canvassing and like talking to our neighbors. And in 2016, as you all know, there was a pretty big election taking place. And during that election, when we were out talking to neighbors on doors about just getting out to go vote, but also really talking about how we could have universal health care, universal child care, like things that were, possible for us. We would have organizers coming back to the office in tears. And when we would debrief about what happened with the day, what we were finding is they're like, yeah, we're out here talking to people about how you can have universal health care, universal child care, universal elder care. And they're like, yeah, that sounds great, but is my Somali neighbor gonna get it? Because if they are, I don't want it. And we knew we had a problem, that we were not equipped to have real conversations with folks without naming the big elephant in the room. And the fact is that way too often we try to have these like economic populism conversations with folks, and we're not actually grounded in the racial dynamics that are taking place and the ways in which racial dog whistles are used over and over and over and over again. And we hear them all the time. And if we're not attuned to them, if we're not inoculated against them, we can be persuaded by them. And that's even folks who have the kindest of hearts, right? And the greatest of intentions. And so we started this research project, a national one, with some dynamic people, Heather McGee, Anat Shankar-Osorio, Ian Haney-Lopez. These are like researchers and linguists and social psychologists. And it was all with this theory that was tested and proven that if we have intentional conversations with people across the country, and most certainly for us, with Minnesotans across the entire state, about that is like grounded in what we can have, what we can be, what we can do together, and is intentional about naming race, naming class, naming gender, and all the dynamics that come up with it, calling out the villains in our lives who have like violated our values, and naming the vision of what we could have together. Like, will that actually allow us to another plane of conversation? And what we found overwhelmingly was yes, 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 yes. And so race class narrative then went from a theory to praxis in my work, because I get to work with a bunch of other dynamic organizations and communications practitioners here in Minnesota, through labor unions, through workers' rights organizations, through climate justice organizers. And we have built out a robust race class narrative framework in which we talk about the values, we name the violation of those values and the villains who have perpetrated it, and we get to talk about the vision of what we can have together. And when we do so in that order, using our own words, when we have our leaders use their own words, because you are the expert of your own experience. So it's not talking points, but it is a framework. And when you use it, you actually move the largest group of people. And that is not necessarily people who are on the far left or people who are on the far right. It is this big, giant middle group that we kind of call the imaginary middle, because they're not necessarily grounded in one ideology or the other. They are holding two at the very same time. And so what we know is that when we have a bold message, when we say it with confidence, when we say it repeatedly, and we're leaning into race, we're leaning into class, we're leaning into all of these dynamics, but speaking with like honesty and truth, but values, that is what moves that large crew of people. And these are people who maybe voted for Bernie, maybe voted for Trump, maybe voted for Obama. Like, it actually isn't as much about their partisanship, but it's about where they are ideologically. And so we get to do that work over and over again in so many robust ways, but most certainly it did inform mine as we're thinking about the world we're creating and how we can have conversations with our neighbors, there's so many people who are like, oh, I just wish I could talk to my neighbor again. Recognizing the polarity and the divisions that we're seeing in our communities, in our neighborhoods, even in our churches. And so race class narrative has been and kind of off-ramp to the muck and mire that we've been in. And so we're also envisioning this world in Bovota where people were having and are having continuously these honest conversations, these vulnerable conversations, but also ones that are intentional about being focused on what we are building, what we are creating, not just what we want to tear down and what needs to be dismantled, because those things have to happen as well, but it's how we're simultaneously making a world where we can all thrive. And so, I'll pause because I did see your hand and I most wanted to get some questions in too. But so let me grab you here first and then we'll come to you.
I'm a Methodist minister who has lived in central Minnesota most of the time in Minnesota from 75 when we went to Wake in St. Cloud where my husband taught at college in Benedict. It was called White Cloud for young. There were virtually no people of diversity at all, except that the refugees started coming in. And in addition to being a minister, I had worked with English as a second language, and they were from Southeast Asia, and I had lived in Southeast Asia for 3 years, so that's one reason anybody can do it without special training. But now my grandson has graduated a year or so ago from Madison to school because he lives in St. Cloud. And the music teacher there is amazing. She's been there for decades. She herself is a College St. Dominic student. And during his graduation, the many Somali students that are going now to the schools in St. Cloud, and my granddaughter went to Apollo High School, and there was a large number, but there wasn't much intermingling or learning about each other from her experience. But anyway, this music teacher did have a choir presentation at the graduation that was so beautiful, and it was influenced by Somali music as well. And so it gave me hope,
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, when did this bloomer thing happen? Because I never saw that much coverage of it.
Yeah, so that was in 2019. Yes. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm a boomer, so I was involved in the 70s and late 60s in anti-Vietnam War, civil rights, women's consciousness raising groups, spiritual councils, and then I did my dissertation on collaboration among different community activist groups.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, do you have people who are boomers in your group?
Oh, yes. Are you meaning in within Isaiah, Faith in Minnesota, in the organization? Yes. Or are you talking about within the world of mine in their leadership in the?
Like for instance, the anti-Vietnam War, there were teach-ins that we did, and so these are things that might be helpful now to learn because there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
We only got so far.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So most certainly I can answer in both spaces, both in the Isaiah side and in the world of mine side. Most certainly with Isaiah Faith in Minnesota, yes, we love our boomers. We have quite a few. Just organizationally, we have over 300 congregations, many of them Christian institutions across the state who work with us, and then we also organize several Unitarian congregations who may not consider themselves Christian, and then also about 50 Islamic mosques, which is a huge number considering there's about a total of 80 in the whole state. And so that most certainly includes a very wide variety of folks across race, gender, class, and most certainly age. And what is beautiful about that is we have a central leadership team So a crew of people from many different congregations all across the state who come together every month, and they are, because we consider our leaders actually truly our leadership, and our leaders are folks like you who are in congregations, who are in these spaces every day. It's not the staff who get paid to be a part of Isaiah, right? And so the leadership team are the ones who actually get to direct and steer the ship. They make the decisions about where it is that we're going to go, what is the next thing that we want to do organizationally, where do we want to take this power vehicle, and we get to strategize together about how we're going to get there. And that is absolutely multiracial. We have a young adults coalition, which is, Gen Z to millennials, but we also, just largely our congregation base does tend to skew older. And so most certainly there's just a wide variety of folks with brilliant and beautiful ideas. And then as I think was also named, we also organize Black-owned barbershops and about 500 childcare centers across the state. Many of them owned and operated by immigrant women. And so, yeah, it is definitely a very intentional process of trying to make sure that we have as many voices in the room, because Isaiah's kind of tagline, but what we lean into is faith and democracy. And it is really about really trying to both embody, but also create the promised democracy that we don't get to see represented, that we actually get to create it for ourselves as we're building it for the rest of the state, country, world. And then likewise in mine you'll see that the elder council, if you will, and then, that's what they're called, the elder council, who helps to kind of guide the guidelines and rules of the city. They are absolutely also multi-generational, multi-faith, gender and race. So there's definitely these dynamics kind of continue on even in the world in which we're building. So yeah.
Thing that you're trying to develop about how people work together, because that might be real important to have some sort of model where people could start learning about those things.
Absolutely. Yes. So we run the race, class, gender narrative. We run those trainings. This month, actually in the month of May, we've run 4 of them, but usually we do one once a month. You can find those trainings at faithinmn.org/trainings, and we list them out where folks can join them. You can join them virtually, but they are live, so you'll get interaction and get to ask questions. But we also give tools and we give practice time for people to be able to practice it. And you can use this framework that I was saying, where you're talking about your values, naming the villain, casting the vision. You can use it most certainly in social media spaces. You can use it when you're writing letters to the editor, op-eds in your local paper, but you can also use it at the kitchen table with Bob. It's you can use it when you're just, watering your grass and having a chat with your neighbor. I mean, as a person who also implements it, I recognize I use it every single day, and not just in my work, because I find it to be a way in which you can be really intentional about both getting to know someone, getting to know what their values are and how you share them, getting grounded to hear what are the stories that they're told about why we don't have the things we deserve and need. And you can also start to find pathways into how we can work together to accomplish those things. And that's even with folks that you may not agree with, probably don't agree with on a vast amount of things. But it gives you an opportunity to be able to move forward in some kind of alignment, even if not full agreement. And so we run those trainings again every month. We are also building out modules because it's been in high demand, where people are like, I want to use this in regular conversations day to day. I want more, practice in how to do that. And so we're starting to run those as well.
Could you talk just a little bit about all those are great ideas, and how you mean, I know I have an idea about the race, class, what's it called,
Race class narrative. Yeah. Yeah.
But can you get, just, not that you wouldn't get, not, I mean, we don't have time for you to get real specific.
Yeah. Most certainly, since we're in the city of Minneapolis, this will be a very relevant example. So in Minneapolis, we had a big election last year, right? And we had 3 amendments that were up. We most certainly saw the one on rent stabilization that passed. We also know there was a policing and public safety one that didn't. Both of those campaigns use race class narrative in their messaging. And even though the policing and public safety one didn't pass, it did move from a 13% support in December of 2020 to a 43% support in November of 2021. And a huge reason is because of the ways in which RCN, race class narrative, was used over and over again. And essentially it worked like this. So you may have heard it if you were, really involved in these conversations, but a lot of times it started with, you know what, every single person in Minneapolis, no matter what they look like, where they came from, what color their skin is, what part of the neighborhood they live in, they all deserve to be safe in their homes and in their neighborhoods. We all deserve that, no matter what, right? But we also know that currently in the city of Minneapolis, the Police Federation has held a stronghold on the city's charter, and that they have continue to have that stronghold, and they are the ones who get to hold all of the resources of the city and determines when and if we want to invest in other forms of safety, like mental health opportunities, like other kinds of workers who can actually help to build this up to be more robust than just armed police only. But we know that when we come together across race, across class, across income, we can expand our public safety. We can make it possible to also have all these other qualified professionals, like mental health experts, like social workers, like homeless outreach teams that can work alongside police officers. And that'll allow us to have a more expanded and more fully funded public safety system. That is race class narrative, where you talk about the value, you talk about who has blocked your value from coming to fruition, and then you talk about the vision of what you can have. So that kind of framework is what makes more space, more room, more opportunity. So even people who voted no would be like, oh, I do agree with you that, like, we do deserve more. We can do this. We can have that. So you're actually moving people more to a place of, like, getting to the next level of what is possible. So yeah, that's an example of it.
So it's like there are a lot of people are problem solving kind of people. They're focused on the problem, but you try to find a way to work more towards.
What's your name?
Chris.
Chris, you're fantastic. You caught something that a lot of people don't right away. You're absolutely right. So what Chris has named is true. What actually tends to happen in conversations is we usually start with the problem. We just naturally do that. We start with a problem. If you even think about any email you've gotten from a candidate or a legislator or an organization or philanthropy, it's like, everything is terrible, things are really bad, people are homeless, folks are hungry, people are dying, like everything's awful. Here's a solution to what could fix that. If we cared more for each other, if we did this thing, if you gave us some money, then here's the action. Do this thing, right? So it's usually problem, solution, action. That is the formula that we are naturally using all the time and what we're hearing. But race class narrative pushes differently, and it does require some memory muscle to do it, where you're talking about your values, the villain, and the vision. So it does make it is different. But that's great that you picked that up. Yes.
I just want to comment on a couple of things. Your emphasis on the vision is really, I think, so important. I used to be a fellow at the Humphrey Institute in the Leadership Center, and I would consult around the world, actually. And the power of a vision, you can get a group of people, and it needs to be clear, believable, widely held, and human enhancement.
Yes.
And things happen like that. In another life of mine, I was an independent film producer.
Oh.
So the power
Yes.
again, is important. And well, the last thing about mine that I like so much is I spent half the year on Lake Superior.
Mm.
And that body of water, to those of us who live close to it, and many others, is so important to protect and to see it as more than just a resource
Yes.
for thirsty parts of the rest of our country.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
like what I do.
Lovely. Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Absolutely right. And we're for those of you who are interested in getting to see the full pilot, I know Isaiah, we're working on doing a screening of mine. So just getting to show the whole thing. And it'll probably be when we're a little bit more into the safe zone of having consistently nice weather outside, and we'll like set up a big projector and kind of do a whole thing with stacks and all that. But what is really great about mine currently, so it is an award-winning miniseries, which I'm really proud to be able to say. We were in Tribeca last year, and we have won several awards in many different film festivals. We're headed to Miami in 2 weeks. We were in LA for Afrofest. We are hoping to get in even in the Black Film Festival here in Minneapolis. So it's really great and exciting. We won an Afrofuturism Award a few weeks ago for the pilot as well. And we have written out, we're probably writing out our second season now, even though we still have to finish getting this one produced. So we worked with, that's the other thing that's important. So we worked with the actual animators who drew all of our characters and created all the animation is an organization called Slathik, which is a women of color ran animators. So we were also very, sometimes we say like, we want to be, as expansive as possible. We want to be as inclusive as possible in many different projects, not just something like this. But it isn't always the fastest way to do things. It's not always the most convenient way to do things. And this project has taken a really long time, but we have always, every step of the way, we're like, we want to get our funding in a way that is actually sustainable and beneficial to, we're not just going to take it from anybody, right? We want to ensure that that the writers, the music producers, the voiceovers, you may have noticed some of the voices, like Russell Hornsby is a dynamic award-winning actor who played the voice of Eustace. The voice of Blaze is actually a non-binary person, Black, Latin, how do they identify? Afro-Latino or Afro-Latinx, non-binary person, but we wanted Blaze to also actually be a non-binary voice actor, right? That took time to find the right people for these things, but we really wanted to make this as true to, sometimes ideological purity can be not helpful. I want to name that, right? But in this particular film, we had the space, we had the ability, we had the time to do it, and so we wanted to do it right. But yeah, yes. Which thing? We got all kinds of ways. Yeah. So most certainly, if you want to get involved more with the actual project of mine, like if you want to see the pilot, if you want to donate to the cause of us getting it finished and getting Slathik to finish all of the innovation, you can just connect with me directly, because I can also make sure we get you on the email list for when we're gonna announce here in Minnesota, when we're gonna announce the viewing. Yes.
Cards.
Yes, absolutely. Then, yes, you can get our lovely, we have these over on the table there if you didn't get one already. But that will also have our more info for the Mind series. So you can see here, it's for those who are watching online, www.mindseries.com is where you can get more info about us. You can also get my contact information on that site as well there. So that's where you can just get more information about the series. If you're interested in getting involved with Isaiah, which I highly recommend, I mean, I recommend mine too, but Isaiah is a long-term, like more sustainable way of getting involved. You can go to isaiahmn.org and sign up. We can most certainly get you involved with our organizers. We work on racial justice issues, social justice issues across the state, in every part of the state, and on a series of things: housing, climate, healthcare, childcare, elder care, you name it. We probably are working on it. And we're like right now, we're very heavily involved in the legislature trying to ensure we get some paid family medical leave for everyone in this state. And so that's definitely how you can get involved with that. Yeah. Yes, that's the best way. It's just so then you can get connected. Also, race class narrative. Again, you can go to Faith in Minnesota for that.
I think mine is great,
Thanks.
but I'd like to get involved in community organizing.
Yes. Yes, Chris. Yes. Yes. Sign up.
We have a round of applause for our speaker, and you have to imagine the people who are online will applaud him also.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation, very interesting. Just a real quick comment on what we have coming up next week. How the Streets Were Made, Housing Segregation and Black Life in America, by Yelena Bailey. We'll have the author here to tell us about her work and that particular study. And then on May 22nd, we have Sam Graber, who does a podcast series. He's actually a playwright and works with the Playwright Center, but he does a podcast series on immigrant rights and immigrant issues, and he'll be here talking about his podcast series. So wonderful presentations, wonderful presentation today. Thank you so much, and wonderful presentations coming up. Oh. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you so much. We are at the end of our time and the end of our recording. Thank you.